By sunrise, the news had spread across Lagos like wildfire. Chief Adewale Oladipo, billionaire oil magnate, was dead. And with his death, a storm was about to descend on his family, a storm of greed, betrayal, and secrets that no one could have imagined. Chief Adewale Oladipo's mansion in Ikoyi was draped in mourning cloth. Black ribbons fluttered at the gates, while chauffeurs lined the streets with convoys of sleek black SUVs. Lagos society had lost a giant, a man whose name was spoken with awe, envy, and sometimes fear. Born in Ibadan to a poor cocoa trader, Adewale had clawed his way to the top with ruthless determination. From oil fields in the Niger Delta to skyscrapers in Victoria Island, his empire stretched across industries and continents. By the time of his death, he was worth billions. But behind the empire was a family divided. The first to arrive at the mansion that morning was Kunle Oladipo, the eldest son. At 42, he was tall, polished, always dressed in imported suits. He carried himself like a man who believed the empire already belonged to him. Next came Adesuwa Oladipo, the middle child. 39, elegant but simple, with calm eyes that revealed little. She had been her father's quiet companion, helping him with his foundations and charities. She never craved attention, and perhaps because of that, few took her seriously. Finally, there was Tunde, the youngest at 28. He pulled up in a red sports car, music blasting, sunglasses on, flashing a grin to the cameras outside. Lagos knew him as a playboy, reckless, flamboyant, always in the gossip columns. To the world, he was the spoiled child of fortune. The three siblings stood in the grand foyer of the Ikoyi mansion, surrounded by mourners, but they barely looked at each other. Beneath the black clothes, the rivalry was alive, silent but sharp. The funeral was a spectacle fit for royalty. Governors attended, senators bowed their heads, and foreign businessmen flew in on private jets. The pews of the cathedral in Victoria Island overflowed as tributes poured in. Kunle took the podium first, his voice smooth as he spoke of continuing my father's great legacy. Adesuwa remained in her seat, quiet, her hands folded. Tunde arrived late, stumbling slightly, hiding his face behind dark shades. But behind the tears and tributes, Lagos was already whispering. Now that chief is gone, who will take control? It must be Kunle. He's the eldest. But Adesuwa was closest to her father. And Tunde? That one only knows nightclubs and fast cars. The burial ended with the lowering of the golden casket into the red earth. Fireworks lit the sky, a strange mix of grief and celebration. But as the dust settled, the real drama was only beginning. 2 weeks later, the Oladipo children received an official letter from Banjo and Banjo Associates, the law firm that had managed their father's empire for decades. They were to gather for the reading of the will. The letter was short, but its weight was heavy. In that document lay the answer to the question all of Nigeria was asking: who would inherit the Oladipo empire? Kunle smirked when he read his copy. To him, it was only a formality. He was the first son, the natural heir, the crown prince of Lagos business. Adesuwa folded her letter quietly, placing it under her Bible. She trusted her father's fairness. He had always promised that none of his children would be left behind. Tunde tossed his letter on the table, laughing with his friends. Another boring meeting. Let Kunle take it. I just want my share for cars and holidays. But fate was already writing a different script. The day of the will reading arrived. The Oladipo siblings entered the imposing offices of Banjo and Banjo Associates on Lagos Island. Reporters camped outside, cameras flashing, hoping to capture their reactions. Inside, they were ushered into a mahogany-paneled room. The air was heavy, the walls lined with portraits of stern-looking legal titans. At the head of the table sat Mr. Banjo, their father's trusted lawyer, his silver hair gleaming under the chandelier. He opened a leather folder, cleared his throat, and began. This is the last testament of Chief Adewale Oladipo, signed and sealed 6 months before his passing. The siblings leaned forward. Kunle adjusted his cufflinks. Adesuwa clasped her hands tightly. Tunde yawned, tapping his fingers on the table. The storm was about to break. The air in the mahogany conference room grew thick as Mr. Banjo, the family's lawyer, closed the official testament. Chief Adewale's estate, he said solemnly, is to be divided equally among his 3 surviving children, Kunle, Adesuwa, and Tunde. Adesuwa exhaled quietly, her chest loosening. That was the father she remembered, fair, deliberate, never favoring one over the other. Tunde smirked, leaning back in his chair as if already planning his next vacation. But Kunle didn't move. He sat stiff, his jaw set, eyes burning. Then slowly he rose to his feet. From his leather briefcase, he produced a thick folder and laid it on the table with a loud thud. "That won't be necessary," he said smoothly. Father prepared a more recent will. One that reflects his true wishes. The room fell into stunned silence. Mr. Banjo's hand trembled slightly as he flipped open the folder. Inside was a neatly typed document bearing Chief Adewale's name, signature, and seal. "This cannot be," Adesuwa began. Kunle cut her off, his voice sharp. "It is valid. Father understood I am the only one capable of running this empire. He chose me and only me." Adesuwa's lips trembled. "Kunle, you're lying. Father promised us." Kunle slammed his palm on the table. "Enough. Stop embarrassing yourself, Adesuwa. Run the Oladipo group? Lagos would laugh. You belong in a church choir, not a boardroom." Tunde jumped to his feet, fists clenched. "You think you can just take everything? Father would never cut us out. Never." Kunle's smile widened. "Oh, Tunde, Father tolerated you, but we both know you were his shame. Reckless, irresponsible, a disgrace to the Oladipo name. This empire is mine now." Adesuwa sat frozen, tears burning her eyes. All her life, she had been the quiet one, the daughter who served, who stayed loyal, who kept her father's trust. And now, her own brother humiliated her in front of strangers. Mr. Banjo shifted uncomfortably. "This document appears authentic," he admitted reluctantly. "It bears the chief's signature." The word struck like a hammer. Authentic. Valid. Legal. Adesuwa's world crumbled. By the next morning, the story was everywhere. Kunle Oladipo emerges sole heir to billionaire father's fortune. Siblings sidelined in shocking will revelation. Social media buzzed with speculation. Of course Kunle got it all. He's the first son. Adesuwa was never serious about business. Tunde? That one only knows clubs and cars. Adesuwa shut her curtains, refusing to step outside. She scrolled through headlines, each one painting her as irrelevant, weak, forgotten. Kunle, meanwhile, basked in the spotlight. He appeared in interviews, shaking hands with politicians, declaring his plans to honor his father's legacy. Cameras adored him. Lagos elites raised glasses in his name. Tunde drowned himself in nightlife, surrounded by sycophants, his anger hidden behind laughter and liquor. Alone in her small Surulere flat, Adesuwa sat at her desk staring at a faded photograph, her father, arm around her shoulder, smiling proudly at a charity event they had attended together. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Daddy, why? Why would you leave me with nothing?" Her tears fell onto the photo, smearing the edges. But beneath the grief, a spark ignited. She clenched her fists. "I won't let him destroy what you built. I won't let him bury me alive." Kunle thought he had won. But Adesuwa was about to discover that her father had left behind a secret, one that would shake the Oladipo family to its core. The knock on the door came late at night. Adesuwa, wrapped in a shawl, hesitated before opening it. Standing there was an elderly man she recognized instantly, Baba Shola, her father's former aide, the man who had served Chief Adewale faithfully for decades. His eyes darted nervously as he pressed a sealed envelope into her hands. "Your father trusted you, Adesuwa. He knew this day would come. What Kunle showed them, it was a lie. Take this key. Go to his study in Ikoyi mansion. Look under the bottom drawer of his desk. But do it quietly. Not even the walls must hear." Before she could ask questions, Baba Shola hurried away into the darkness. Adesuwa's hands shook as she tore the envelope open. Inside was a brass key, heavy and old. Her heart pounded. Could this be the proof that her father had not abandoned her? The next evening, Adesuwa drove alone to the Ikoyi mansion. The house was quiet now, the funeral guests long gone, the corridors echoing with silence. She walked through the familiar halls, her footsteps heavy with memories. In her father's study, the air smelled of polished wood and old leather. His desk stood at the center, grand and imposing. Kneeling down, she pulled at the bottom drawer. Nothing. But then, with trembling fingers, she slid the brass key into a hidden lock she had never noticed. The drawer popped open, revealing a false bottom. Beneath it lay a sealed brown envelope, stamped with her father's personal seal. Her breath caught. She broke the wax and unfolded the handwritten pages. Her father's voice seemed to echo through the words. To my beloved daughter, Adesuwa. If you are reading this, it means the vultures have descended. Know this, I do not trust Kunle. He betrayed me. He stole from the company, diverted funds to his secret accounts, and lied to my face. He is not worthy of the Oladipo legacy. Her eyes blurred with tears as she read on. I leave my empire, all that I have built, to you, Adesuwa. Not because you are the eldest, nor the loudest, but because you are the only one who carries my values. You are strong where they are weak. You are humble where they are proud. You are the true heir. Her hands shook, barely able to hold the paper. Relief flooded her chest, mixed with rage. Her father had trusted her all along. Kunle's will was nothing but a lie. But then came the final paragraph, words that made her blood run cold. Before my death, I learned a truth about Tunde. He is not my blood. I raised him as my son, and I loved him as my own, but he was born of your mother's mistake. To protect the family name, I kept it silent. Yet in the end, the truth must be known. Conduct a DNA test. It will reveal all. Adesuwa staggered back, clutching the will to her chest. Tears poured down her cheeks. Her father had given her everything, but he had also left her with a devastating burden. Tunde, the brother she had defended, even in his recklessness. The boy she had carried on her back as a child. He was not an Oladipo. How could she tell him? How could she destroy him with this truth? A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Adesuwa froze, heart pounding. She stuffed the documents back into the envelope and slid them into her bag. The door opened slightly. Kunle's shadow stretched across the carpet. His voice slithered into the room. Adesuwa, what are you doing here? Her throat tightened. Paying my respects, she whispered, forcing calm. Kunle's eyes narrowed, scanning the desk. For a moment, it seemed he would step inside. But then he smirked. Don't waste your time in here. Father made his choice. Accept it. Move on. He closed the door behind him, his footsteps fading. Adesuwa collapsed into the chair, shaking violently. Kunle suspected nothing. But if he ever discovered the envelope in her bag, he would destroy it, and her, without hesitation. Driving back through the Lagos night, Adesuwa gripped the steering wheel tightly. The city lights blurred past her, but her mind was clear for the first time since the funeral. She had proof. Proof that her father had chosen her, not Kunle. Proof that Kunle was a thief and a liar. Proof that would crush his false throne. But she also carried a secret that could shatter Tunde's world. As she parked outside her Surulere flat, she whispered to herself, "This ends in court. Kunle will pay. But God help me. Tunde must know the truth." The next battle would not be fought in silence. It would be fought under the blinding lights of Lagos High Court, before the eyes of the nation. And when the truth came out, the Oladipo name would never be the same again. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Businessmen, journalists, and curious onlookers had gathered, eager to witness the most sensational inheritance case Lagos had ever seen. The fate of billions hung in the balance. At the front sat Kunle Oladipo, immaculately dressed in a gray designer suit. His face carried the smugness of a man who believed the empire was already his. Beside him, his high-powered legal team whispered strategy. On the other side sat Adesuwa, calm but steely, her bag clutched to her side. Inside it, her father's handwritten will. Her lawyer, a sharp young advocate named Chinedu Okafor, leaned toward her. "Today, we end his lies," he whispered. Behind them, Tunde slouched in his chair, sunglasses hiding his bloodshot eyes. He looked detached, as though none of this mattered. But deep inside, his stomach churned with dread. The judge entered, robes flowing, gavel striking wood. The room fell silent. Kunle's lawyer rose first. "My lord, we present the valid will of Chief Adewale Oladipo, naming Kunle Oladipo as the sole heir. Any claims to the contrary are baseless attempts to smear his rightful inheritance." Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras clicked. Kunle leaned back, confident. Then it was Chinedu's turn. "My lord, the document presented by Kunle is a forgery. We will prove today that Chief Adewale left a different will, one hidden in his study, entrusted to his daughter, Adesuwa. And we will also reveal a truth so shocking it will change the Oladipo family forever." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Kunle smirked, shaking his head. "Desperation," he muttered under his breath. The proceedings began with document verification. Kunle's team paraded forensic experts who swore the signature on his will was genuine. They presented seals, dates, and testimonies from dubious witnesses. But then Chinedu stood. He held up the brown envelope Adesuwa had discovered in Ikoyi. "My lord, this is the true final will of Chief Adewale Oladipo, handwritten and sealed with his personal stamp." The judge motioned for the clerk to examine it. Murmurs filled the courtroom as the seal was confirmed authentic. The handwriting matched the chief's own notes from decades of contracts. Kunle's face stiffened. He gripped the edge of the table, his confidence faltering for the first time. Adesuwa's eyes met his. For once, it was she who held the power. Then came the moment that would shatter everything. Chinedu stepped forward, his voice echoing through the hushed room. "My lord, in this handwritten will, Chief Adewale not only disinherits Kunle for his betrayal, but he also makes a startling revelation, one that can only be confirmed by science. We request the admission of DNA test results concerning Tunde Oladipo." Tunde's head shot up. "What?" The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge pounded his gavel. "Order! Order in the court!" Chinedu unfolded a document. "The DNA test proves that Tunde is not the biological son of Chief Adewale Oladipo." Gasps, louder this time. The reporters surged forward, flashes blinding the room. Tunde ripped off his sunglasses, his face pale, his mouth open in shock. "That's a lie," he shouted. "He was my father. He raised me." Chinedu continued firmly. Chief Adewale knew this truth but chose to love Tunde as his son regardless. He provided for him in the will. But the empire he left to Adesuwa, the daughter who carried his true values. Adesuwa closed her eyes, tears spilling silently. Her father's words replayed in her mind, "You are the true heir." Kunle shot to his feet, face red with fury. "This is nonsense. Was fabricated by a desperate woman." But it was too late. Forensic experts, called in by the court, testified that the will Kunle had presented was indeed a forgery. The signatures had been traced. The seal stolen. The judge's voice thundered across the courtroom. "Kunle Oladipo, you stand guilty of presenting fraudulent documents in a court of law. The empire of Chief Adewale Oladipo shall pass to his rightful heir, Adesuwa Oladipo." The room exploded in chaos. Reporters rushed out, shouting headlines into their phones. Kunle's legs gave way, and he collapsed into his chair, sweat pouring down his face. The heir who thought himself untouchable was now disgraced, exposed before the world. Tunde sat motionless, the truth tearing him apart. He wasn't an Oladipo by blood. Everything he thought he knew about himself crumbled. Adesuwa placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. "Blood or not, you are still my brother. Father loved you. I love you. That will never change." Tunde broke down, burying his face in his hands. For once, the reckless playboy was just a broken young man. As photographers swarmed outside the court, Adesuwa stepped into the sunlight, clutching her father's handwritten will. Lagos society stared at her with new eyes. The quiet daughter they had dismissed was now the rightful head of the Oladipo empire. But in her heart, she carried not triumph, only the weight of truth and the scars of a family forever divided. The sun blazed down on the steps of Lagos High Court. Dozens of reporters surged forward, microphones stretched, cameras flashing. Adesuwa stood tall, flanked by her lawyer Chinedu, her brother Tunde beside her, still dazed from the revelations. Kunle was nowhere to be seen. He had slipped out the back door moments after the judge's ruling, his once proud shoulders slumped in shame. The headlines were already flying across Nigeria. Court declares Adesuwa Oladipo sole heir to billionaire empire. Kunle Oladipo exposed for forgery, faces fraud charges. Shocking DNA twist rocks Oladipo dynasty. The empire was hers. But the victory felt heavy, almost hollow. In the days that followed, Kunle's world collapsed. His accounts were frozen, his allies vanished, and even his closest friends refused to take his calls. Where once his name opened doors, now it closed them. Rumors swirled that he might face prison time for fraud. Business partners distanced themselves, politicians cut ties. Kunle, the man who once strutted through Lagos as if he owned it, was reduced to hiding in the shadows. For the first time in his life, he had nothing. Tunde locked himself away in his Lekki penthouse for days, blinds drawn, bottles scattered across the floor. The truth replayed in his head again and again. Not Adewale's son. Not an Oladipo by blood. It tore him apart. All the wild parties, all the reckless nights, they had been the actions of a boy desperate for his father's love. And now he knew the truth, that love had been real, but the blood tie had not. When Adesuwa visited, he couldn't even look at her. Why didn't he tell me? Tunde whispered hoarsely. Why did he let me live a lie? Adesuwa knelt beside him, holding his trembling hands. Because he loved you. Because to him, you were his son in every way that mattered. And you are still my brother. Nothing can change that. Tunde's tears flowed freely. For once, he let himself grieve not as the playboy prince, but as the lost child he truly was. Adesuwa's burden. The boardrooms of the Oladipo group looked different with Adesuwa at the head. The directors, once skeptical, now nodded in approval as she took decisive steps, exposing corrupt deals Kunle had hidden, protecting workers' rights, expanding her father's charity foundations. But power was not what she had sought. Every decision weighed on her shoulders like a stone. She had inherited more than wealth. She had inherited a broken family, a legacy tainted by lies. At night, in the silence of her Ikoyi apartment, she sometimes stared at her father's photograph and whispered, "I won, Daddy." But it doesn't feel like victory. In the clubs of Victoria Island, the gossip never ended. Some praised her strength. Adesuwa is the true daughter of her father. Dignity runs in her blood. Others sneered. She only won because Kunle slipped up. A woman can't run an empire like this for long. But slowly, the tide began to turn. As her leadership shone, more began to respect her. The quiet daughter they had dismissed was now the most powerful woman in Lagos business. Months later, whispers reached Adesuwa that Kunle was plotting revenge. Bitter and desperate, he had begun courting old enemies of the family, offering secrets in exchange for support. But before he could act, the police came knocking. The fraud charges had caught up to him. Handcuffed and disgraced, Kunle was led through the very streets he once ruled. Crowds jeered as cameras captured his fall. The mighty first son of Adewale Oladipo was now nothing more than a cautionary tale. On the anniversary of her father's death, Adesuwa gathered with Tunde at the family grave in Ibadan. The red earth was cool, the air heavy with silence. Kneeling, she placed fresh white lilies at the tombstone. Tunde stood beside her, hands in his pockets, eyes wet but proud. "He chose right," Tunde said softly. "You're stronger than both of us." Maybe that's what he always saw. Adesuwa smiled faintly through her tears. "We all carry him, Tunde. Blood or not, we are still family. And family is what he fought for, even in his mistakes." The two stood together in silence, united not by inheritance, but by the love of a man whose shadow stretched far beyond the grave. Adesuwa returned to Lagos not as a victim, but as the rightful heir of the Oladipo Empire. She knew challenges awaited, rivals, doubters, vultures circling her every move. But she also knew this: she would rule not with greed, but with dignity. For her father's empire had been built on steel and oil, but its true foundation was trust. And though her family had fractured, she would not let his legacy crumble. In the end, Adesuwa understood what her father had meant when he wrote those words. "You are the true heir."